that I got on my very first encounter with a Rotarian recently was that you give away $10 million per week. You do amazing things. Why aren't we telling people? And so we created these tools and approaches, these keys to communication. We took this workshop idea to Google down in California last June. And one of the engineers, so this is the most creative organization perhaps in the world. And so the people who work there are very bright. And they're creating tools, and they're just jazzed about the tools, what they're making. And they're just bubbling over about it. So one of the guys in my workshop said, you know, I have lots of conversations on Google Canvas, which is, we're not talking virtual, this is just a beautiful place. She says, but all the conversations turn out to be the same conversation. I said, with our tools, they never will be. So whether you want to develop more intimacy, which could be with your wife or it could be with a stranger, because intimacy is not necessarily a thing of sexuality, it's a thing of connection. Or whether you want to reflect upon risk-taking, because everybody wants to take risks. If you want to have a new lens, show a new lens on a situation, these are the questions that do it. My team at the time actually worked for Google, and he said this is intelligence augmentation. So imagine that you are, I know a couple of people, imagine you're Jim Force. That would be a pleasant thing, because when you work with the Force, you know that all the things that work for you. But imagine you can't quite remember all these questions, and you're sort of struggling, and you're going into a situation and say, what can I do? Well, you just refer to some of these questions and use them. You can use them time and time again. You know what, I was in education for 30 years. And in that time, I've been to many Pro-D activities. Lots of you have gone to conferences. 95% of what people pick up at conferences or at workshops is never used. So what is the lack here? The lack is that there's not a shift of heart. Shift of heart is shifting into a sense of curiosity, like leaning into the person, so to speak, and thinking, this person is a tremendously interesting person, and I'm going to ask them a question. And I'm going to ask them not a lame question. This stands for lame, not listen. I'm going to ask them a question which is going to assume something about the person I'm talking to. So here's what I assume. I assume the person is a person of adventure, accomplishment, of interest. You can take this anywhere. So a friend of mine and I worked on a project called the Victoria Community Supper. And the idea was, let's bring some 40 homeful people and 40 homeless people at a plated dinner. Not a cafeteria, not where you stand in line and just get doled out food. This is a plated dinner, and let's see what conversations began. So I created a menu of questions, and one of those questions is this one. What's a recent adventure? See, I assume that you've had adventures, not necessarily Big White, which is a lovely adventure, or snowshoeing. And when you assume that of somebody else, you know, there's another little tip. They will always come back and ask you. Right? So I was sitting at a table, this one First Nations guy rolled up in his wheelchair, homeless. So I thought, ooh. Now, there's a little trick in this thing. It's not a trick, it's an idea. Is that before you ask a question, make sure you know your answer, because when they ask you the question, when you ask them the question, they're going to come back. So when you think, if you ask somebody, what's a recent adventure? Because that's a nice question, and they come back and ask you, then you can tell them, you have a choice. You can talk to them about your real estate practice, or you can tell them about Rotary. I am not casting any judgment as to which is the best thing to talk about. But they will ask you, and they're listening to what you say, and there is an open door. Because instead of having this scene where most people in life don't listen, ignore, and stay on the superficial, now their heart is open and they're going to listen to you because you listen to them. So I asked that guy, the First Nations guy, who I could easily dismiss. And he said, oh, that's easy. I hitchhiked to Tofino. I said, really? How long did it take you? He said, 10 to get picked up, 10 to 15 minutes. I got there, I went surfing. So you think that somebody who could easily be dismissed doesn't have a story? Our approach is, one of our keys to success is, assume the very best about the other person, ask a question when your spirit is right, and they will ask you, and it opens the door. But, you know, there's old school stuff. One of the things we're talking about here is what you want, if you want to be successful in this, have that shift of heart, you need to suspend how you normally ask. I never ask anybody, hey, how you doing? Right? It's just too much work, it's a waste of my time, you know, and I value it and I value theirs.